Welcome to your podcast number 5 on Shakespeare. This one will be covering the monarchs of England. So this little handout breaks down for you the dates of the reign of the specific individuals. As you move to the present, it becomes a little easier for you. Obviously, we have Elizabeth today, 1952 to present. But let's look back at what Shakespeare would have looked at, and that is the history of England. Because as you'll remember, Shakespeare took a great deal of his material from what we call the Chronicles, and there were several different writers of Chronicles. But he took his work's ideas, the stories from the Chronicles, and adapted them to the stage. So a little bit about the history too. Notice we've got our Saxons over here, and then you have the Danes that keep coming. It's a little warmer in England, so they keep invading, and they invade long enough and fervently enough to take over the crown at a certain point. The Saxons come back in and retake over, and then of course your date of 1066, this is when William the Conqueror, Guillaume le Conquérant in French, comes over and takes over England, wresting it from the hands of Harold. If you would, I'd like for you to look up the Bayeux Tapestry, which chronicles that battle, the Battle of Hastings. All right, so once the Normans are in place, we have a government that is Norman, and of course the Normans, Northmen, they came from the north, they settled in the north of France. They took on, which is unusual, the customs and habits of those people that they had conquered. They took their religion, they borrowed their architecture and their ways, their culture. And so when they leave to conquer England, they're taking with them not French manners, not Parisian manners, but Norman French and Norman French manners into England. So we're writing in French during this period of time. And then we have the Plantagenets, and we're going to hear much about them because the War of the Roses begins here with Richard II. He's the last of the formerly called Plantagenets. His reign ends in 1399 when Henry IV takes over the crown. Now, this is called the House of Lancaster, and you'll recognize Lancaster and York. They styled themselves Plantagenet through this period, but we're going to keep the War of the Roses nomenclature of Lancaster and York to keep things straight. So Shakespeare is going to write about this period of Richard II through Richard III. All right, Richard II from the other side to Richard III. However, he doesn't do it in the easiest fashion. What he does is to take Henry VI. These were the first plays that he staged, were the 3 plays of Henry VI through Richard III. So it covers these monarchs. Then he goes back and he starts with Richard II, Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2, and concludes this history cycle with Henry V. We call that, each of these sets of plays, tetralogies. I'll put that up on the board in class. And a tetralogy, tetra is of course 4, so you have the 3 parts of Henry VI plus Richard III. The Edwards are in between. And then you have Richard II, parts 1 and 2 of Henry IV and Henry V. That's the second tetralogy. We refer to this one as the early, and this is the later tetralogy. Shakespeare's, of course, writing about the Middle Ages, which is when these wars are taking place, during Tudor reign. So the Tudors begin with Henry VII, that's Henry VIII's father, and move through to Elizabeth I, an extremely doubtful period of time where religion can change hands overnight depending on who is on the throne. Now, Shakespeare's career, his writing career, he's born during Elizabeth's reign. And so most of his life is under Elizabeth's reign. And James I, who will adopt his troupe as the Kingsmen will mark the end of his career. In 1613, we're talking about the last plays. 1616, Shakespeare dies. So he's writing under Elizabeth I and James I. And under each of these, this popular theater, which was a very new thing at the time, you wouldn't have found such a thing under Henry VIII outside of traveling troops, ragtag groups, tumblers, that kind of thing, or people performing in open yard beer houses, that kind of thing. These troops, these organized troops that were money-making ventures under these two, brought scrutiny in the form of censorship. That's the response from the throne, is that these plays needed to be censored so that they wanted to be certain that the monarchy, for example, or religion would not be misused on the stage. Just to close this discussion of the monarchy and its importance when studying Shakespeare, so we know that his career takes place between these two monarchs. Charles I, who's James I's second son, is going to be overthrown, decapitated, 1649, and a commonwealth is established with Cromwell and later his son Richard Cromwell, Oliver and Richard Cromwell. So under the Commonwealth, and already in 1649, the theaters were closed because these were places where bad things might happen, right? If in America, one of the things in the Declaration of Independence was the freedom to meet and discuss. This is kind of the germ, if you will, of that. Theaters were closed because they were afraid of the types of seditious behavior that might be taking place there, revolution being fomented. And after this Commonwealth, the theaters are reopened under Charles II. So this hiatus of theatrical activity during this time, and the danger of theatrical activity during the Civil War, means that there is quite a world between the theater of the Jacobeans and the theater of Charles II. These two did not go to the public theater. Charles did, because he wanted everyone to see him, and especially he wanted everyone to see which mistress he was with that evening. So a very different world between these two, even though Charles II is, of course, the son of Charles I. And that concludes our discussion of the monarchs of England.